My wife's mother said I wasn't good enough. She lost access to her grandchildren instead. Eleanor Whitmore told me to my face at our wedding reception that her daughter was marrying beneath her station. I was a high school teacher making $52,000 a year. Isabel was a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company making triple that. Eleanor stood next to the champagne fountain in her $3,000 dress and said teachers were noble but poor. And did I really think I could provide the lifestyle her daughter deserved? I told her Isabel and I loved each other, and that's what mattered. She smiled in that way wealthy people do when they think you're adorable and stupid. She said love doesn't pay mortgages or country club memberships. Then she walked away to talk to someone more important. Isabel hadn't heard the conversation because she was dancing with her father. I didn't tell her about it that night because it was our wedding day. I didn't tell her for 3 years because I thought Eleanor would eventually accept me. I was wrong about that. Eleanor had other plans. She started small with comments about my car being old or my clothes being off the rack. She'd mentioned how Isabel's ex-boyfriend David was now a partner at a law firm downtown making mid-six figures. She'd ask when I was planning to get my administrative credentials so I could at least be a principal and make decent money. Isabel would tell her to stop, but Eleanor always had an excuse ready. She was just making conversation or showing interest in my career or wanting the best for us. The comments never stopped. They just evolved. When Isabel got pregnant with our first child, Eleanor's interference shifted into overdrive. She insisted on paying for the nursery furniture because she said we obviously couldn't afford quality pieces on a teacher's salary. She showed up at our apartment with a designer crib that cost $4,000 and said it was non-negotiable because her grandchild deserved the best. Isabel tried to refuse, but Eleanor started crying about how she just wanted to help, and why were we being so proud when clearly we needed assistance. I stood there watching this manipulation happen and said we appreciated the thought, but we'd already ordered furniture. Eleanor asked if I meant the cheap set from Target I'd added to our registry. Her voice had this edge to it that made it clear she thought Target furniture was basically child abuse. Isabel looked exhausted from pregnancy and Eleanor's emotional manipulation. She gave in and accepted the crib. Eleanor hugged her and told her that was smart. And she looked at me and said, maybe I'd learn to accept help gracefully instead of letting my pride hurt my family. I wanted to throw that $4,000 crib out the window. Instead, I helped carry it upstairs and assembled it in silence while Eleanor supervised and made suggestions. Our daughter Sophie was born on a Friday morning in March. She was perfect. 7 pounds, dark hair, Isabel's eyes. Eleanor arrived at the hospital 3 hours after the birth with enough flowers to open a shop and a photographer she'd hired to capture the moment. She pushed past me into the room and started crying over Sophie while the photographer snapped pictures. I asked Isabel if she'd known about the photographer. She shook her head, looking confused and tired. Eleanor said she wanted professional photos of Sophie's first day because these moments were precious, and obviously we couldn't afford a good photographer ourselves. The photographer spent an hour posing Eleanor with Sophie while Isabel tried to rest, and I stood in the corner wondering when this became Eleanor's experience instead of ours. When I finally asked the photographer to leave because Isabel needed to sleep, Eleanor said I was being selfish and difficult. She said grandmothers have rights too. That phrase stuck with me. Grandmothers have rights. As if her being related to Sophie meant she got equal say in how we raised our child. As if our home and our family were somehow her property because she'd contributed DNA. The first year of Sophie's life was a constant battle with Eleanor's boundary violations. She'd show up unannounced to our apartment, claiming she was just in the neighborhood and wanted to see her granddaughter. She'd criticize how we dressed Sophie or fed Sophie or scheduled Sophie's naps. She bought clothes without asking us and then got offended when we returned them because they weren't our style or were impractical. She started a college fund for Sophie and told everyone at her country club about it, making sure to mention that Sophie's father couldn't afford to save for her education on a teacher's salary. Isabel confronted her mother twice about the constant criticism and boundary violations. Both times Eleanor cried and said she was just trying to help because clearly we were overwhelmed and struggling. She'd hug Isabel and apologize while somehow making it sound like Isabel was the problem for being so sensitive. Then within a week, Eleanor would be back to the same behavior. I started documenting everything. Every unannounced visit, every critical comment, every manipulation, and that's when things took a turn I never expected. To see the full story, click the link below or go on my channel.